All right, everybody, welcome to, I believe this is episode 3 of Pushing Over the Edge. This is going to be a two-part series. Part A is going to be mostly about learning the basics of hand switching. We're going to go over a few things to look out for, and just kind of get the foundation built for how to switch a hand. And then part B is going to include more gameplay, and kind of displaying these ideas throughout the game, and as well kind of some more advanced tips that again we'll get into on the next episode. um, but I wanted to do a video on hand switching because I notice a lot of people, if you have watched my live streams, I do this quite often. I usually, when I pass on the Charleston, a lot of people have said I'm a riskier player when it comes to the Charleston, and I like to pass tiles that are considered, together. Or like for example, if I have a 7-8-9 crack and an 8 bam and a south wind, sometimes I pass like two cracks and a wind as opposed to 1 1 and 1. And again, a lot of people just kind of wonder why I don't get rid of specific tiles and pass safely, and it's because I like to have options. And the reason I like to do options when it comes to the Charleston is because it allows me to switch hands better. Now, switching hands is a really hard concept because a lot of players that play this game may not realize that switching a hand has a lot of factors that play into it. However, it is something that is achievable. Again, most of the time when I have my hand switches in my head, it's before the game actually begins, and that is a tip that I'm gonna try and help you guys with. Because I noticed that a lot of the times when you are trying to switch a hand in the middle of gameplay, it can get very, very hectic and cause some errors. And again, you don't want to make any errors when you play the game. So hopefully this one will help out. But again, it's kind of a harder tip or harder topic, but it will definitely help you get some wins because I've noticed a lot of people usually commit to one hand. And when you commit to one hand, it could work out for you. But if that hand fails, what's your plan B? Just play defense. Um, so yeah, we'll get into it. So let me see if I can slideshow this here. Okay, so our first step in the game of Mahjong for American is, or mostly any game, is picking a category. Um, Basically, when you pick a category, you want to look at your hand. You want to identify if your hand has any multiples. When I say multiples, I'm talking about pairs, puns, or cons. There are some times where you will have pairs of tiles that don't really match up. For example, if you have two 1 bams and two 8 dots, those don't really go together as well. But then that's when you start looking at your other tiles and you kind of identify what you have that could potentially get you into a category like 2 4 6 8, consecutive, 1 3 5 7 9, quint, any like numbers, winds and dragons, that kind of stuff. Um, and just sometimes again, I feel like this is a game by game basis because it's really hard to say pick a category what fits the hand best without showing a lot of examples, because every game's different. And that's why that's what brings us back in play is every game, it won't be the same no matter what. So just being able to identify what hand or what category fits your hand best when it's dealt is good. I usually try and pick a category when at the start of the Charleston, because then it allows me to kind of see what hands I have potential for, and that's what allows me to have a couple of ideas in my head and kind of pass along tiles that I know aren't in the category, because when I pass those tiles around, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have the highest chance of A, winning, and the highest chance of having a hand that might build up quickly with the Charleston. Because when the game comes around, I don't get to exchange tiles, and it basically comes down to me picking a tile I need, picking a Joker bait tile, which is very uncommon nowadays, or picking a tile up from a discard. So basically, when you pick a category, make sure you're comfortable with the category. I notice a lot of people when they first start playing the game, um, they always go to the consecutive run category, and it's a good category. It's pretty simple. I will say that's probably the easiest one on the card. Um, but just try and go out of your comfort zone a little bit and play some of the other hands, and just kind of, again, this goes down to knowing what's on the card. um, I never, I try and tell a lot of people when I go to tournaments, or when I went to a tournament once, I noticed that a lot of people, or some of them, didn't have a card with them. And I was like, I don't know if that's because, some people might see you looking at a category on a card and kind of get knowledge from that. But I mean, knowing what's on the card, I would always have it in front of you no matter what, because there are hands on the card that you may not know are there, or hands that you just haven't played or don't play frequently, or ones that just come in every so often, that you might be able to see when you pick it, or when you start with your opening hand of 13 or 14 east wind tiles. So being able just to know what's on the card and being comfortable with that category, because you don't want to play a winds and dragon hand if you've never played in that category a lot, or don't really go there, because then you're not going to know what's in that category, and that will prevent you from not being able to switch hands effectively, and that could cost you the game if a lot of your tiles go out. And then again, know the hands in the category and what they require. That's a key one, because there are multiple hands. Like for example, Winds and Dragons. You can swap from Winds and Dragons to the 2022 hand, or potentially to the singles and pair hand. So again, a lot of switching that can go on around there. So just again, knowing your category and being comfortable with it. And again, if you only like playing consecutive runs, that's fine. I would just say try and venture out a little bit and play a hand. It's not all about winning most of the time. It's about having fun. And most of the time when I play, I have a lot of fun playing a hand I usually don't play and win on, because then it's like, wow, like, I won on something that I never play on. And it's usually a beautiful hand, against the norm hands that you usually see one on. But and then make sure to not panic if a pair goes out fast, as any emotion can give off a hand. This goes kind of into our later subject, and I'll talk more about it. But again, when you are picking your hand in the beginning, I notice a lot of people kind of off the start kind of give off some gruntles like, oh, no jokers, or wow, this hand's a mess, or something like that. I, I don't think you should give off any of those emotions, because then you kind of like, when other people do that, it gets your head off of your hand. And I feel like you just need to revolve on your own hand and not what other people are doing in the beginning. Because if you revolve around what other people are doing off the start before anything happens, that'll kind of get your mind off of, what you're supposed to be doing and picking the category. So avoid any emotions that people give off at all costs, and also don't give off any as well. All right, so our second step is determining the strength. Basically what that means is, when you're picking a category, know kind of what the strength of it is by what you have. So like for example, if you have a lot of even tiles, play an even hand. And you when determining that, it's like if you have a mixture of tiles, let's say your hand really is far off and nothing's going together, no pairs, all singles, kind of figure out what the common pattern is. If it's odd, even, winds, dragons, kind of find that and determine the strength of it. And when I say determine the strength, kind of look, this is the step that basically goes about the whole entire game. But I like to mention it off the start, because if you play, for example, a 2 4 6 8 hand, and you don't have any eights, but you have a lot of twos and fours, you may as well also be falling under the consecutive run category, because there are a lot of hands that have like a 2 3 2 3 dragon, 2 3 4 5. Like there's a lot of potential with numbers between consecutive run in all three of the categories. Not so much of the 1 3 or 3 6 9, but a lot of the categories can fall under consecutive run as well. So just kind of determine the strength of that hand when you first get it, and kind of help it make it pick your category. Because if you see a lot of evens, don't just go straight to the 2 4 6 8 category, because that may not be the best category for your hand. And again, next episode I'll kind of show that more. But and assess whether or not the hand is possible to make. So, again, when it comes to picking the hand or picking the category, again, I don't like picking hands right away. I usually just go with a category. This kind of falls into though, like kind of when you're looking in a category and what hand matches, what you have. Um, Figure out if it's possible. Like, and again, what are your gaps? When I say gaps, like it means tiles you don't have that are on that hand. For example, if you play the top hand under 2 4 6 8 with 3 flowers, a pair of two, and a pair of fours, and you don't have the fours. You have the two, a six, and an eight, and then some flowers, but you don't have the fours. um Figure out if that pair of fours is something that that's basically the only hand you can play, or you could potentially go down to one more hand to the 2 2 4 6 8 8, and that's an option as well. And again, it's really hard to say what to do without looking at a hand, but again, just determine that strength and know if it is possible. If a hand has a lot of gaps in it that are like puns and cons, it is possible. If you have like a single tile, let's say a 3 dot, and your 3 dot needs to be a con and you have no jokers, that is considered a gap, but it is possible to get a tile when you already have a single of it. When it comes to a pair, it's a little more complicated because I usually like to have pairs established for a hand before I go for it, because then it really comes down to, did I draw the pair? Or because if someone throws the pair early on, then that's when the hand switching really starts to come into play. But just kind of figure out if a pair is needed in your hand, and if your hand that you picked needs 2 pairs, I wouldn't go for that hand because, again, after the Charleston, we'll go on to the Charleston one next, but um, just know your gaps and kind of, again, when you pick a category, you should kind of have a brief understanding of what hands are in there. And by looking at your hand, you should know what your gaps are, and that'll kind of help you pick a hand and pick your options when you're going under that category. So our third step is the Charleston. So when it comes to the Charleston, like I said, I am a pretty aggressive passer. I don't really play it safe ever, but a common passing technique is using passing tiles. When I say passing tiles, like for example, if you play a 2 4 6 8 hand, you're obviously going to be passing the odds. Just pass the tiles that you know have zero potential with the category chosen. um, Consecutive run is very hard for this one. Basically, what I would say for this one for consecutive run is just pass the tiles that don't go together. Like if you have an 8 crack and a 7 crack, I may get rid of those because, again, when you look at what the rest of the stuff you have, if you have a lot of lower tiles, pass the upper. That's usually my go-to is, it's lower or upper or mid. Mid tiles are like the five through. I usually like to say 1 through 3 is lower, 4 through 6 is mid, and then 7 through 9 is upper. And if you don't have a lot of upper tile potential with consecutive run, then you're gonna want to get rid of it, because then it could bring, they're not going to really do anything if those build up. As of, if you pass upper tiles and someone is playing an upper tile hand, they may end up passing the lower tiles to you, which could help you build your hand better. An example of this is, again, don't pass a dragon, even if it's a dragon that doesn't match the suit, but don't pass it unless needed, as it could have potential. If you do end up, usually you end up with 3 or 4 tiles that don't work with your hand after, getting a dealt hand that, don't have any potential. If you have more, again, just kind of assess, if you do get something, and again, this is really advanced, but um, yeah, basically, if a tile has some raw potential for one single hand under the category, try not to get rid of it, because I've had many games where I assume that one hand is going to be my go-to, and I have a backup hand, and then some hand on that category randomly comes in, and then I end up playing that one and switching because I kept the tile. Um, and then ignore safe passing techniques if you only have 3 tiles to get rid of. Don't break options. I've seen a lot of people do this. They're like, they want to safely pass because they don't want to get rid of like 3 wins, or 3 tiles that run together, or if you have a 7 8 pair, 8 7 crack, 8 crack, 8 crack, pass those away. If you have a hand that has potential, or tiles that have potential with a hand under the category, and they are pretty good with potential, for example, if you have a single white dragon and it could fall under the opposite dragon hand, the 1/2/1/2 dragon, I might get rid of that one, knowing that it has kind of potential. Just again, identifying your strong suits and strong hands under that card to switch to really determines what you're going to get rid of. But again, do not panic if you have to, pass something that could lead to a decent or good pass, because again, you're playing to win, which means you're playing with your own hand. So again, don't worry about what other people are doing in the Charleston. Just worry about what you're getting and what you could build off of it. Um, Again, don't break options, as you may not get what you need for one hand. And again, having all these options allows you to really pick what you're going to play and also have a backup plan. Having a backup plan is really important with switching a hand. So if you end up on a cross with only two tiles, I've done this a lot, and it's happened a lot to me where I may be playing a singles and pair hand, and I end up on the second or first across with only two tiles to pass because all the tiles work with my hand or have potential. What I do is I pass a tile that is a pun, so it's easy to call. Basically, for example, if we play the 1 through 5 consecutive run hand and I have basically 1 through 5, I usually would get rid of a 3 or 4, 3 or 4, let's say they're in dots, 3 or 4 dot, because I can call those tiles and basically, they're likely to be thrown. But depending on the hand, pass a pun that is likely to not be kept. So passing the 4 might be, 3 and 4 are kind of tricky because, that could be a 1 3 5 7 9 or a 3 6 9, and then the 4 is only in a 2 4 6 8 category. So a 4 would be a lot safer than a 3 because the 3 falls under a lot more categories than the 4 does. So again, be mindful of that. But again, if it's your only option, just go with it. And then, for example, like right here, pass 1 and 9 instead of 3 and 5, because 1 and 9 really, 9 is kind of iffy because 3 6 9. But 1 3 5 7 9, 1 really only falls under one category, unless it's any like numbers. But any like numbers we're assuming is any number in the game. So I'm not mentioning it, but again, it's always there. But 1 has a higher potential of coming around or being thrown than a 9 or a 3 or a 5. But again, just go off of that. And again, this kind of comes with experience, but just kind of, be mindful if you have to get rid of something that works with your hand. Just be mindful if it will come around again. So then we get into the gameplay aspects. So when is the switch too late? Usually, I would say a switch is too late when, most of the when it's not achievable. And when I say it's not achievable, it means that I would have to get a lot of jokers to either get a hand, a lot of tiles that have already been thrown out, or a pair that is already gone or only has one remaining with a small amount of tiles left. When I switch a hand, I usually pick 2 to 3 hands before the Charleston ends in order to have my mind on them. I usually always have at least 2 or 3 hands in my head because then it allows me to switch if something goes out. I'd say two hands are pretty easy. Like if you play the bottom consecutive run hand, the 1 2 3 1 2 3 concealed, that really works well with the singles and pair one where it's the flower flower 1 2 3 1 2 3, and those hands really work together. And as well, you could also switch to the 1 2 3 4 in two different suits. So again, just kind of be mindful when you pick. I usually always have a backup plan, but always have a second one as well, because then it will let you kind of flip and flop. And then if one hand seems to come in more than another, try to discard accordingly so you're not locking yourself into one hand until it's very close, 1 or 2 tiles away. That's a really big thing that I kind of don't like about switching hands, and I've noticed a lot of people make the error, and I kind of mention it right here. Calling tiles early may hurt you in the pairs category. So if you call a tile, like for example, a 7, let's say you call a 7 bam pun. know what other hands have a 7 bam pun that could work with the hand that you have. So that way, let's say if you're playing that consecutive run 5 through 9 and you declare 7 bam pun, and the other players notice that and get rid of 5 and 6, then you could switch to 1 3 5 7 9. You could switch to 6 7 6 7 dragon, 6 7 7 7 8. Just kind of know what hands can work with what you have before calling a tile. Because when you call a tile, you really commit to something. And when you commit to something, you really have to know, are you close and what are the risks? Because if you declare a tile that only works with one hand, then you are set in that hand. But being able to know if you are set in one hand and can switch to another really would help you out in the chances of, basically winning the game. And then look for similarities. Again, this goes to the point, does the hand have the same pun or con of tiles? Because when you declare a tile pun, you want to know what other hands have that as well. Because then you might have to switch depending on what comes in. And then this, some continue. What are other players calling or discarding? If a lot of players are discarding tiles that are your pair, and you have one of it, and let's say it's a 1 dot, and a player discards the 1 dot about 20 tiles in, which means there's 2 more remaining, and another player gets rid of one, and there's 60 tiles left in in the wall. At that point, I would really start looking at other hands, because depending on how close I am to a 1 through 5 hand, with that 1 dot being that pair, I might want to find another hand that I might be able to switch to, because or if I can use the one as a pun, because getting a pair of a tile is pretty difficult, especially when multiples of them have already been out. So just be on the lookout for that. And then what are your picks from the wall looking like? Are the tiles that fit in the category but are too far of a stretch? So again, knowing the strength of a hand and how hard it is to obtain, like if you have a pun con hand, how close are you to your puns and cons? Do you have like multiples of the tiles that you need, or are they singles and you have 2 jokers? If that's the case, then you're looking pretty far from that, and I would consider that a stretch, because just because you have jokers doesn't mean that playing puns and cons are going to be easy. And again, if you put those jokers up with the tiles, you don't want to put them up when there's potential for joker bait, because other people may be holding those and then they could steal it, as opposed to you getting your own joker back. It is very rare, I would say, for a player to get their own joker back, and that is basically the luckiest you can get. So then basically, yeah, kind of just from the picks you get throughout the game, kind of then determine what hand you're going to be playing out of the 2 or 3 that you choose from. And then as well, knowing what's going out, because if you pick something up that goes to another hand better, again, discard accordingly so it doesn't lock you in until you're 1 or 2 tiles or discard tiles away. But again, just be on the lookout for what other people are playing too. And then again, potential of the hand before switching. Don't switch to a hand that requires a lot of jokers if you don't have any, because most times, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get them. And then don't let other players tempt you with a discard. Usually for a con, I wait, as it not only eliminates joker bait potential, but also makes it easier for me to switch if I need to. Early game, that's why I always say discard those tiles early game that people may want, because then it pushes them into making early decisions, which could cost them the game in terms of switching a hand. If you basically, you only want to call a tile if you know that you're pretty close to a hand, like again 2 to 3 tiles away, because what's going to happen is when you declare that tile, you're locked in, and when you're locked in, you only have chance to switch to very specific hands, and each category again is very specific on what tiles are in each hand and switching potential. And again, we'll get into that next video, but just before you declare a pun or a con, know what you're playing and know if it's going to hurt you in the long run or if it's not. If you're only waiting on a single tile for a pair and you have 1 through 5, let's say you're playing the 1 through 5 hand, I'm using that as a hand because it's pretty simple to look at, and you have 1 dot, two of the 2 dots, so you have that pair. You have 1 3 dot and a joker. You have 1 4 dot and a joker, and then you have 2 5 dots and a joker. That's when I would start taking the I'd start taking the tiles like puns or cons, because I know I'm very close to that hand, so I would definitely commit to that hand. But again, if I kind of have a single joker and I have two of a pun tile and two of a con, I would definitely be a little weary about taking that pun of the 2 tiles that I already have, because then it locks me into that hand, and that pair may go out before I get the con, so then I get a little screwed there. But again, try very hard to conceal your emotions, as some players may have a single tile that you want and throw it earlier if you express interest. I've noticed that a lot on the online, like if you discard a tile, it kind of has that timer if someone wants it. Being wary of it's really hard in the online. They have like a button in the left hand corner to avoid it, but you don't want to turn that on, because then it kind of screws up the flow of, like, if a tile goes out that you need, you can't unswitch it in time to get it. So, but yeah, again, in real life, if a towel goes out, if you say hold, make sure when you say hold that you really do want it, because then other players are definitely going to have like about 5 to 10 seconds to know what you're playing and get a feel for what tile's there and what's going out. Because then they might start getting rid of other tiles to see if it tempts you to know kind of what you're playing. So this is a big one that you really need to try really hard not to show any interest in a specific tile unless you're calling for it. And then our fifth step is if all hands fail. This is the part I don't like talking about, because it's the worst possible, situation. But if you draw a tile like a flower that a player may need, this happens a lot. Or let's say a tile that is a pair that a player may need. I just said flower because most of the time flower pairs are common. But again, let's say you draw a tile that a player needs that is a pair, and it is the last one out. Determine if you are ahead of them in rotation. When I say that, I mean, let's say they're sitting to your right. That's ahead in rotation. You're sitting, basically you're on the left and they're on your right. That's basically what it is. Just know if they come after you or before you in rotation. This means that if you are ahead of them and a player gets rid of that same tile, you can declare the Mahjong before the other player. So being able to use that pair tile or that tile that the other player may need may allow you to play a hand and win, as opposed to the other player winning. And again, you could always go to defense and hold on to the tile, vice versa, but this is just worst case scenario. And then also use your jokers accordingly. If you are lucky enough to get jokers, a very common mistake when switching hands is putting up jokers that might have helped you switch hands. Try and play with the tiles you have before using the jokers, as they can easily get you a pun of tiles that you may not have. I've noticed this a lot, and again, early pun calls and early cons are, I'm okay putting a joker up with a con if I know I need it early on, but putting a joker up with a pun early on is a very easy mistake, because what will happen is it could screw you out of a hand that you might have to switch to later on, where you don't have the tile in your hand. Remember, a joker is more valuable than a single tile. And in your draws that are picks from the wall, I'll call them picks, but in your picks from the wall, you may end up getting tiles that fit in that same hand that you were going to punt on, which then you can punt on it later on. But knowing what you're picking and kind of getting later on into the game kind of makes you know exactly what hand you're going for, and that's when you want to start using your jokers, because if you use them too early on and your one hand that you kind of thought you were going for doesn't come in, it's going to be a lot harder to switch. So that's going to do it for episode 1. I know it was a lot, but again, episode 2 will show gameplay, and it will have more of the styles in depth of kind of about what's going on. But again, this is a lot of information. That's why I split it into 2 separate parts. But if you have any questions, please let me know. I will post this presentation in the description, so that way if you would like to see it, you will have full access to. And if you have any questions, please feel free to comment them down below or bring them to the live stream, and I will definitely be able to answer them for you.